Okay, so I'm in Sublime Text and I'm looking at the file called MediaQueriesBefore.html. And it's located in the examples lecture 23 folder. Let's take a quick look at the structure of our HTML. And it's a very simple one. Again, just a H1 just to tell us where we're holding. And all we have in our HTML really is two paragraphs. First one is ID'd with P1 and the second one is ID'd with P2. Let's take a look at the styles that we have for these paragraphs so far. As you can see, we're following our own advice and we have some base styling that we're going to apply to these paragraphs before we even get to the media queries. We're not going to pay too much attention to H1, that's just really for our web page to look a little bit more decent. We'll pay attention to the paragraph tags, however. So here we're targeting our paragraph and basically just giving it a border of 1 pixel solid black and giving a bottom margin of 15 pixels. And then we're distinguishing each paragraph by using the ID selector by giving it a particular color. And the first paragraph is going to be fairly large. It's going to be 300 pixels by 300 pixels. And the second one is going to be a different color and it's going to be 50 pixels by 50 pixels. Well, let's take a look as to what this looks like in the browser. So here are our two paragraphs. One is fairly large, another one's small. Let's take a look at what happens if we make the browser width smaller and smaller and smaller. And as you can see, really nothing happens at all, right? We could go on and nothing is going on. So let's take a look as to what we could do with our media queries. So here I have a couple of sections that I specifically designated for our media queries. The first one is going to try to target large devices only. So what are large devices? Well, large devices in my vocabulary will be anything that is at least 1200 pixels wide. So we'll go ahead and write media query for that. And the min width, right, min width is going to be 1200, and don't forget pixels, and we'll open the curly brace and close the curly brace, and we're ready to target our paragraphs just for devices that are at least as large as 1200 pixels wide. So we'll go ahead and do our first paragraph, and what we'll do is we'll change its width to, let's say, not Windows width, to let's say 80%. So what that will mean is that paragraph number 1 at width 1200 pixels or wider will take 80% of our screen. As for paragraph number 2, we'll make it that its width is 150 pixels, which is a little bit larger than it is, actually 3 times as large, right, because it was 50 pixels before, and we'll actually change its height to 150 pixels as well, so it'll be a perfect square. Okay, so let's save our file and switch to our browser. Let's reload. And let's take a look. Since our browser now is definitely wider than 1200 pixels, you see that both of the paragraphs actually were affected. Now, how do I know that my browser is wider than 1200 pixels? Well, if I press Command Option I, or on PCs, Control Option I will bring up my Chrome Developer Tools. And now if I start dragging the side of the browser, you'll see in the top right corner that it's showing you the actual size. And you see something else interesting. You see at 1200 pixels, 1214 pixels, and as we go smaller and smaller, when it goes to past 1200 pixels, you see that everything jumps to its original base sizes, right? And if I make it a little bit wider again, it will jump again to the styles that the media query with min width 1200 pixels specified. Let's go back and make this larger again. Okay, so let's switch back to our code and write one more media query, but this time for medium-sized devices. So what are medium-sized devices? Well, medium-sized devices is probably something around 992 pixels and 1199 pixels. Now, where am I pulling out these numbers? Well, I'll tell you the secret. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm pulling them out of the standard ranges, width ranges, that the Twitter Bootstrap framework defines for its different media device sizes. We'll speak about Twitter Bootstrap fairly soon, but for now, our media queries should be minimum width of 992 pixels, and remember that and max width of 1199 pixels. And remember, we're trying to make sure we don't overlap with the previous media query, otherwise we're basically going to end up applying both styles again. So we're going to open up the curly brace and we'll target again paragraph 1, and we'll go ahead and make it smaller. We'll make its width still in percent, but at least we'll make it as small. We'll make it 50%. And paragraph number 2 will make its width to 100 pixels. So again, a little bit smaller than for a larger screen size. And the height also will make it 100 pixels. So now you can see that our base size makes the first one 300 by 300, second 50 by 50. If the screen width falls into the range of 992 pixels and 1199 pixels, we're going to increase our size of the first one and we'll make it 50% of the screen. And paragraph number 2 will become 100 by 100 instead of 50 by 50. And if we stretch our browser all the way to 1200 pixels and above, the first paragraph will become 80% of the screen and the second paragraph will become 150 pixels large. And obviously none of this makes any sense in terms of nice layout. This is really just as an example to try it out. So let's switch to the browser and see how that worked out. Let's make this a little bit smaller so we could see all of them, but still see the screen sizes, and go ahead and refresh it. So we're now at above 1200. As we go a little bit slower to 1200, when we get to a little bit less than 1200, we switch to our second media query, which makes this be 50% of the screen as opposed to 80. If we could go back, we could see the 80% of the screen. That's the 80% of the screen. And go a little bit down, and if we're below 1200, this is 80%, 50% of the screen, and this is 100 by 100 pixels. And if we go even below 992 pixels, as we get closer and we switch from 992 to 991, you could see that we're back to our base styling because we have no media query that is defined for that particular screen size. Now I'd like to show you one more thing that the Chrome Developer Tools has here. You'll see this cell phone looking icon. If we click that, we'll see a whole different view of our page that we're able to play with. And it tells us here that we might need to reload it. So we'll go ahead and reload that right now to get rid of that warning. But you see here, I could select any device I want and even select between portrait and landscape mode and see what my website looks like in that on that particular device. And I could also go ahead and change the device size right here just by dragging the border of this thing. And one more thing is, if you take a look, it actually shows us in our own CSS that we loaded into this page, what are the different ranges in terms of the media queries that exist. And you can see here, we have one that's from 992 pixels to 1199, and the other one from 1200 and on. And if we go ahead and start selecting some devices, let's see what does it look like on the Apple iPad. It looks just like that in the portrait mode, but if I switch, it will be in landscape mode. It's telling us again to refresh. Go ahead and do that. And you can see that we can actually go and see what happens at these breakpoints, and the points between one media query and another one, it's called breakpoints. So we're now going towards our second breakpoint, and when we get there, you see that our first box basically made itself 80%, and I can't remember what the size of that box anymore is, but you see the difference. And if we jump back, now this one is applying, and if we make it even smaller than that, that breakpoint 992 pixels, and 991 pixels, the breakpoint will change, and now we are back to our base styling. So Chrome Developer Tools are incredibly useful when you're trying to design and test and basically see and debug a little bit your responsive designs. So in summary, we looked at a basic syntax of a media query, and remember it's @media with some media feature in parentheses, or you could combine media features with some logical operator. So here we have media feature in parentheses followed by some logical operator, and in responsive layouts it's usually the AND operator, and then followed another media feature also again in parentheses. Remember not to overlap breakpoints. We talked about how if we structure our media queries with different widths of different devices, that the breakpoints of these widths should not overlap even by 1 pixel. Usually the way you approach this is you provide some base styling and then you change or add to them in each of the media queries. And usually structuring your CSS in this way makes it much cleaner and also much easier to maintain down the line. Next, we're going to speak about responsive layouts.